Hey guys, my name is Nancy and welcome back to Confessions of an Evolving Millennial, where we talk about healing, we talk about growing, we talk about evolving, we talk about navigating life with all its twists and turns, one layer at a time. And sometimes we're just plain out trying to figure it out. We don't pretend to have it all figured out here. We are taking it a day at a time, we are taking it a step at a time, and we're taking it one foot in front of the other. Okay, so welcome back and thank you so much for joining me. And today I want to talk about a topic and a discussion that I seem to be having a lot with people around me, and that is how abuse actually affects the brain and how it rewires your brain. Disclaimer, I'm not a neuroscientist, at least not yet. I could be one day, who knows? But I'm not a neuroscientist. This is purely from some of the things that I've learned over the last 5 years, from the books that I've read. I really love neuroscience. I listen to a lot of people who are neuroscientists, and also I've read a lot of books around it. I've read articles. I've also learned from other people who are in the psychology space, therapists and whatnot, yeah? So this is not me speaking as a neuroscientist. This is just sharing information that I have learned because of also the experience that I had before. So we're going to talk about how your brain actually changes when you stay in spaces where you're constantly in survival mode. And this could apply to abusive relationships, it could apply to toxic environments of any kind, like a toxic friendship, a toxic family dynamic, a toxic job, any toxic environment that you can think of. Although today I'm personally going to talk about it around abusive relationships or toxic relationships, okay? Because that's what I've had experience with, and so I have data, quote unquote, I have data for some of these things that I've learned. Like I'm like, yeah, that actually happened. Yeah, I know about that kind of thing, yeah? So yeah, that's what we want to talk about, and let's dive right in. Okay, before we dive right in, I want to say that this is actually meant to help us to have a bit more compassion towards people who are in abusive relationships or abusive or toxic environments, and you seem to not understand why the hell are they choosing to stay there. First things first, it's just because their brain has been rewired in a certain way. Like them actually being in that environment has affected their brain in a lot of ways, which sometimes is actually the biggest hindrance. Like that's where the battle actually begins. That's where the battle starts, like in the mind, yeah? So yeah, that's just to say that's what I'm hoping to achieve with this video, is that if you've not been in a situation like that, I hope watching this video will help you get some more compassion towards people who are in such situations, and even as you probably help them to come out, or as you just watch them in that situation kind of thing, yeah? Yeah, so that's what I'm hoping to achieve with this video. So first things first, I want to talk about the trauma loop. The trauma loop is basically a cycle of abuse that is constantly repeating itself over and over and over again in any toxic environment or in any abusive relationship or abusive environment, yeah? And this cycle has 4 stages. This is actually something that I was taught by one of my mentors who's a therapist. And I remember when she was telling me these things and I was like, oh my God, yes, that's exactly how it was. Yeah, and the first stage of this cycle of abuse is called the tension phase. So basically, this is where the abuser starts to be very irritable, they become moody, they become distant. There's some tension. You can feel some tension in the room, and they maybe start blaming you for small things, or they start creating conflict out of nowhere, because it feels like it's literally out of nowhere, especially when we go to the last phase. so that it will make sense why it feels like it's literally out of nowhere. Like, where did this even come from? And what this does is that it makes your brain very hyper vigilant. So basically, you're scanning every word that they're saying, every action that they're doing, you know, like you're trying to figure out if there's going to be danger. And the reason why you're actually trying to figure out if there's going to be danger is because your brain actually knows how this cycle goes. Subconsciously or consciously, your brain knows how this cycle goes. And so you're trying to scan if danger is coming. And also because like they basically put you in a place of like fear. You're just generally very hyper vigilant. And then this leads to the second stage. The second stage is now the incident or abuse phase. Now, this is where the incident of abuse actually happens. Now, remember the last stage we've said it's a tension building stage. So the abuser releases this tension that had been built up and it's like sometimes it's a very subtle way, or other times it's very explosive. So basically there's a blow up that happens. Now this could be in the form of physical violence, it could be in the form of emotional or psychological abuse, it could be in the form of them threatening you or actually breaking things around the house. And as much as it could either be subtle or like a blow up, an explosive kind of blow up, at the bottom line, it's always very dehumanizing. And you go into very intense stress, and your cortisol and adrenaline levels spike, and then your nervous system becomes very dysregulated because you are in fight, freeze, or flight mode. Yeah, there are usually three: fight, flight, or freeze mode. Yeah, and then now we go into the third phase. The third stage is now what we call the reconciliation, or sometimes the honeymoon stage, because this is where the abuser actually apologizes. You know, the things that we've seen in movies or stories that we've had. They buy you flowers, they treat you so well, like you feel like you're getting an experience from a totally different person from the previous stage. Yeah, they apologize, some of them even cry, they show you affection, they buy you gifts. I've seen stories of people being bought like a huge ass gift after being like really beaten up silly. Yeah, they promise to even change, and sometimes they even try to blame the explosion on external factors. You know, work has been so hectic, you know, this and this is not working out. They might try to even blame it on external things. And because most of the times, for whatever reason, these people find themselves with people who have a lot of empathy, you actually put yourself in their shoes and you're like, oh yeah, and it's like you actually quote unquote understand their behavior. And also because they're really love bombing you, your brain's response at this particular stage is that dopamine and oxytocin basically flood your system, and so you have this sense of relief, you feel attached, sometimes you even feel like, oh my god, I'm so in love with them. Like, that's how it feels, especially because they're love bombing you. So this is where the trauma bonding actually deepens even further, because you start to hope again. You start to feel, oh my god, this is the person that I fell in love with. I always knew he was in there somewhere. And so you want to believe that the version of them that they are presenting at this particular time is the real them. Like, this is the real them. The other explosion, the abuse, that's not them. This is the real them. This is who they really are. Yeah. And then now we go to the fourth stage. So the fourth and final stage is what we call the calm stage. So this is the stage where things start to feel like they are normal again. Like, it feels like almost like peace. It feels peaceful. You even start to question yourself. You're like, it wasn't that bad. It wasn't as bad as I thought it was. Maybe it wasn't that bad. You start having such doubts in your mind, where you're actually gaslighting yourself, life basically returns to normal. The abuse is minimalized, and you may even see them changing some of the things that you talked about, you know, after the explosion and then the honeymoon phase where they've apologized, they've given you gifts. Most likely you've had a conversation in between all of that. And it's like you start seeing the things that you talked about, it's like they're changing those things. It's like they're working on them. You feel like they're being kinder to you. They're more gentle. They're not harsh. You know, all those things that you might have talked about, you actually start to see some change. And what that does is that it creates hope. Even though it's actually a false hope in a way, but it creates some kind of hope, and then you start to tell yourself, okay, maybe things can actually change. You start to tell yourself that maybe finally he's made the decision to actually make a change, and you know, and now we're going to live happily ever after. Your brain tries to actually stabilize, but it's still kind of like it's still on alert, waiting for the next explosion, especially because this is a cycle that continues over and over and over again. So you feel kind of stuck somewhere between peace and fear. And then the minute you let your guard down, the tension starts to build again. And so we go back to the whole cycle again. And so there's the tension building phase, and then it leads to a whole explosion. There's a blow up, then goes to the honeymoon phase, and then it goes to the calm stage, and the cycle just continues over and over and over again. And actually, the more you stay, the worse it becomes with time. Like now, for example, the first time the explosion will be at this level, then the next time the explosion will have gone a bit higher and a bit higher and a bit higher. And that's how it is, yeah? Even the gifts can go a bit higher and higher and higher and higher when we're talking about the honeymoon phase, yeah? So yeah, that's basically the trauma loop that someone who is in an abusive relationship is constantly going through over and over and over and over again. And this is how it actually affects your brain. So first things first, you have to realize that anyone who is in a situation like this, their brain basically stays in fight, flight, or freeze mode. So they are constantly on alert, yeah? So for example, the amygdala, the part of the brain that processes our emotions, stays on alert, like it's basically hyperactive. This is where our emotions are processed, emotions, especially emotions like fear and anxiety, but also emotions like happiness, sadness, and anger. That's where the emotions are processed. And so for someone who is in such an environment, their brain is actually hyperactive at all times because of that fear that they have. Because remember, as much as the cycle, sometimes they're in the honeymoon phase, this cycle has repeated itself over and over and over and over again. And so their mind knows, even when they're in the honeymoon stage or when they're in the calm stage, their brain knows that eventually they will get to the tension building stage and they'll get to the explosive stage. So without, whether subconsciously, whether consciously or subconsciously, this person is actually constantly in fear, yeah? That's number one. The other part of the brain that is affected when someone is in an abusive situation is the prefrontal cortex, which I believe is somewhere here. I did make a disclaimer at the beginning of the video, and I said that I am not a neuroscientist yet, but from what I've read, that's actually the logical part of the brain. This is the part of the brain that helps us with decision making. So for someone who is in an abusive relationship or an abusive situation, what happens is that that part of the brain actually slows down. That means that it makes it hard to actually make a decision because of that whole cycle of abuse. You know, there's a lot of chemicals that are up and down in the brain. So that part of the brain is actually affected and it slows down your decision making. And what happens is that it makes it really, really hard to think clearly, let alone make the decision to actually leave or even start coming up with an escape plan, yeah, or an exit plan. So that's the other reason why sometimes people will stay longer than you think they should, because you're just like, can't you see what's happening to you? And partly it's just because that their decision making has somehow been impaired because of that cycle of abuse, yeah. And so their decision making is way slower than for a normal person. Okay, and then now the other part of the brain that is affected is what we call the hippocampus. Hippocampus. So basically, the hippocampus actually shrinks over time for someone who is in an abusive relationship. The hippocampus is basically the part of the brain that holds our memories and also enables us to emotionally regulate. So this means that because this part of the brain is quite literally shrinking, it makes it so hard for that person to actually trust themselves or even trust their memories. And remember, there's a lot of gaslighting in abusive relationships. So that part of the brain really shrinks and you start doubting whether what you remember is actually true. Like your memory is generally just affected and you find it very hard to even regulate your emotions. And now you see, if you cannot be able to trust yourself, it becomes really hard to actually make the decision to leave or to walk out. So all of this to say that a lot is usually happening in the brain of someone who's going through abuse or who's in the thick of it when it comes to emotional abuse, psychological abuse, or just abuse in general. There's a lot that is going on in their brain that is actually keeping them stuck. And that is why even with people that I work with, the kind of people that I am holding their hands, the first place I will always start is strengthening your brain, because I know that's where the battle is. And because I know that when people sometimes just walk away before that they've actually strengthened their brains, that's how people end up coming back, even though they know that that situation was not okay for them. But because they've not strengthened their brains enough, they find themselves coming back. So I've actually talked about that in my ebook, which is actually linked in the description box. You can have a look at it. If you're going through something like that, I believe that I've actually put down very practical steps on how to take care of yourself while you're still in the thick of it. The book is actually called Before Walking Away. So basically, it's giving you practical steps to prepare yourself before walking away. And you can be able to also gift it to someone when you click on the link if you're not in that kind of situation and you know someone who is. And I've actually realized so many people know people. Like from conversations I've had with people, they like out of like 5 people, like 3 people will tell me they know someone who's in an abusive situation, which is actually very sad. So if you know someone who is in such a situation and you genuinely don't know how to help them, you can be able to gift them this book. So when you go on the link, you'll be able to see a part whereby it gives you an option to tick a gift, and then you input their details and they will be able to receive the book. And I've also done a voice recording on it because I also understand that faith comes by hearing. Sometimes even when someone is just hearing, I don't know, there's just something that it does. And also to accommodate people who would prefer reading and others who would prefer to listen. And I've also put a special gift for them in that package. And yeah, you can do that. You can gift someone, or if you're not in that kind of situation, yay! You don't know someone who is in that kind of a situation, yay! But you would like to actually help people who are in that kind of situation, you can be able to support by sending directly on the payment, the pay bill that has been linked on this, that has been put in the description box, and we will be able to give away the book to people who actually need need it, but maybe they're not able to purchase it at the time. Yeah, so yes, I hope this video has been informative in one way or another, and I hope this is a conversation that we can continue having. If you have any questions, you can put them in the description box, and I'll try as much as possible to answer all of them. And until next time, thank you so much for watching and staying tuned. Bye.